We're going to do a brief, quick introduction to composting and talk about the biology, because composting is a biological process. And then I'm going to talk about the 5 essentials of composting, okay? And these are the things that provides the foundation for all you're going to need to know to manage the composting process effectively. All right? We're going to basically quickly talk about the different systems that are available, mainly focusing on the single bin systems and leaf mold. I've got some leaf mold here to show you, just so that you can see what you can do with little or no effort. We'll talk about how to use the compost, and then we're going to open her up for question and answer session. So that's what we're going to do today. This is a little introduction. Composting is a way that we can speed up nature's natural process of recycling nutrients and carbon in our ecosystem, in our above land. We know that trees grow leaves in the fall. Those leaves fall down to the ground, and there's a bunch of organisms called decomposers that actually break that down, return nutrients to the soil to help promote and stimulate more growth. So this is that life, death, decay, and regeneration cycle that's so important for everything on Earth. We would not survive and grow our food without these decomposers. As I like to tell the school children, we don't eat without worms recycling these nutrients. We won't breathe without the plants that we see all around us. We are interdependent on everything out there in our ecosystem. Composting is a biological process, okay? I like to tell people we're farmers. And this is a good place here because you're surrounded by farms. You guys understand farming. And all we're doing is we're farming microbes. Even though we don't see them, they need a balanced diet, air, and water, just like the cattle, just like the sheep, just like the kids, the pets, you name it. So if we can understand what they want to eat and how they survive, then we can provide an environment in which they can take off. Now, in this process, there's a bunch of different actors in the process, and it usually starts with bacteria. And there's 2 kinds of bacteria. One bacteria breathes oxygen. They are aerobic bacteria. These are the kind we want to promote in our composting systems. There is another type of bacteria that lives in our gut that are anaerobic bacteria that live without oxygen. Typically in this situation, we eat food, the anaerobic bacteria help us digest it, we get energy out of it, we get some solid matter out the back end, and we also get what else?
Farts.
That's right. Thank you, Lucy. We get gas. Okay. Thank you, Lucy. The kids are a little faster than you guys. The kids are a little faster than you guys. You're going to have to be a little quicker here with me, all right? Anyway, so there's gas. And when we bury materials in landfills and exclude oxygen, as those materials break down, we're getting gas. And gas is now 30 to 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse warming gas. When we burn this stuff in the incinerator up there, we're getting nitrous oxides. And nitrous oxides mixed with the moisture in the clouds create nitric acid. We get acid rain, and nitric acid or nitric oxide is 300 times more potent as a greenhouse gas. So how we manage organic materials is important. By composting, this is the most environmentally friendly way for us to manage these things, and the benefit is we get these nutrients back into our gardens to promote growth, plant growth. Okay? So bacteria start the process. Afterwards, then there's fungus and molds and protozoas and insects and worms and all these. And they also have a role in the process. For example, fungi is everywhere. And it likes to break down cellulose or lignin, the woody stuff. That's why we see it in the forests. Sometimes we'll see it down in the grass in the cow patches. Most of the fungus is happening underground, and the mycelia, which are the fungus roots, are actually feeding on the cellulose, and then they pop up that mushroom as a way, it's like a flower. Flowers turn into seed. The mushrooms pop up and then expel spores, which help spread the fungus around. But fungus is also very important to actually help finish the compost off, because we have woody materials in our garden and landscape materials, don't we? So all these things are important. They work in an ecosystem. It's the same kind of ecosystem that's in the soil. All right, so everything is interdependent on one another. It's kind of like the rabbits eat the grass and the foxes eat the rabbits, up where we can see it. But in the soil, it's all smaller. Some of it we can't see, some of it we can. So when we see these critters, wood lice and different insects and centipedes and beetles and all this, they're playing a role. When we see worms in a compost pile, yeah, that's a really good sign, because the worms will change this stuff into a magical worm cast, which is like an aphrodisiac for plants. The plants absolutely go wild for it. And this is why a farmer's field that's full of worms is a very fertile and healthy soil. The 5 essentials of composting are what I was telling you earlier. It's a balance of green and brown materials. That's the diet. The other second essential is surface area, because the bacteria work from the outside in. The smaller the pieces, the faster they're going to decay. It's like a block of ice. If we put a block of ice out in the sun on a day like today, it may take a day or two to melt. But if we take a hammer and break it up into smaller pieces, that ice can melt in an hour or two. And it's the same thing for compost materials. We can't put these big pieces in and expect them to break down quickly. They won't. So we need to chop it up. And here is my favorite compost tool. Because as I garden, I'm going to chop things up into sections that are 4 to 6, 8 inches long. I don't want big pieces, but I do want to cut things up a little bit. And so for me, it's meditative. Because I can garden like a crazy person all day, and then I'm dumping it into a pile, and all of a sudden I got to chop it up. No, I'm sorry, it's Guinness time. And I don't want to sit there and chop it up. So I do it while I garden. It's very meditative. Pick, chop, pick, chop, pick, chop. All right, bingo. There's the best tool you can have. And these Felcos are great tools. They're expensive, but they last 10 years. You buy those cheap ones, a month or two, they're gone. Okay, they're just a little pitch for Felco. They're a Swiss-made instrument. Next is moisture. All life needs moisture. Whether they're anaerobic or aerobic, life needs water. Visualize the fact that the film of moisture around these particles is where the bacteria and all the critters live. No moisture, no compost, because there's no place for the critters to live. But you can't have it too wet, okay, because it's like Goldilocks. Can't be too hot, can't be too cold, can't be too much, can't be too little, all right? It's got to be just right. So the moisture is wet as a wrung out sponge. Wet but not soaking, okay? And what I'm going to do, even though we don't have a good mix today, I'm going to get this wet so you can feel how wet it should be. It should look sheeny. It should be wet to the touch, okay? The next essential is aeration, okay? Because we're trying to stimulate these aerobic bacteria. There's different ways to do this. Number one is we can put something at the bottom, even just branches, or there's a pallet here. We lift the pile a little bit off the ground. So if there's heat, and you don't need to get heat to make compost, but I'll talk about this. As the heat rises, it pulls air into the pile and it passively aerates. Another way to get aeration going is by turning the pile. You don't have to turn the pile to make compost. It may just take longer. Now you're going to learn today that I'm a lazy gardener and I'm a lazy composter. It doesn't mean I'm not a good one, but I want nature to do the work for me, okay? All right, so there you go. That's the aeration. And the last is critical mass. You need a sufficient volume of material to sustain the process, okay? So what we're going to do is if the pile is too short or small, it may dry out in the summer. And then what happens? Come on, you guys. Nothing, right? Nothing happens. It gets in the wintertime, too short, the pile's going to get too wet. Then what happens?
Nothing.
It gets all stinky.
Does the bacteria die then?
No, the bacteria, you're just going to shift the bacteria.
Oh, okay.
So instead of having aerobic bacteria, you're going to start promoting conditions for the anaerobic bacteria to come in.
Yeah.
So this whole composting process is all about creating the right conditions for these bacteria to take off. Because they reproduce asexually, which means 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 16, 32, 64. So if you give the right conditions, the right food, the proper amount of moisture, you keep it aerobic, yeah, rock and roll. All right? Okay? What are the things we can compost from the kitchen? Someone said
Yeah, the fruit trees.
the fruit,
and
the
the
all
vegetables.
rotted
and the lettuce.
fruit peels. All right, what else?
Tea bags.
Yes, tea bags, if they are compostable.
Yes.
Berries is biodegradable. They're made of plastic.
They're coming back now and then.
Lions, those are compostable, made of paper.
Yeah.
Potato skins.
Potato skins, all right, so potato skins. What else?
Apples, when the trees
Apples.
are
peels
finished.
and
That's
apple
right.
peels.
What else?
Orange peels.
Orange peels, yes.
Coffee grounds.
Coffee grounds, yes.
Newspapers.
Yeah, a little bit. I typically don't like to use much paper in the compost mix,
How about
unless I'm
cardboard?
doing a wormery. What?
Cardboard.
Cardboard, yeah, a little bit. I tend not to put paper in. But we'll bring it to the recycle center. Dave wants it.
Oh, and we do.
Yeah, okay. So what else from the kitchen?
Another roll of paper as well.
Yeah, some tissue paper. All right, that's fine. Brown bin. What else?
Any ashes from the fire?
Ashes from the fire. That's going to be on that side because ashes from the fire are actually alkaline and they upset the pH balance.
What about
fine.
tin foil?
Huh?
Tin foil.
Oh no.
Just a minute. I'll get right to that, but I want to finish up on ash. A bucket? No. A cup? Yes. Because it's going to upset the pH. It's also going to fill in the air holes and suffocate the pile. That's why we don't want to add layers of soil. We've heard layer of grass, layer of leaves, layer of soil. No. We're going to mix. Keep the soil out. Okay? But no ashes in general.
You can put ashes around apple trees and things.
That's absolutely correct. Save the ashes for direct application to soil because they have potassium and phosphorus in it, major plant nutrients. Especially if you have an acidic soil. That will help sort of bring the pH up and make nutrients more available for the plants to
Is
uptake.
that just
Lucy.
wood ash though? Or if it's got coal in it, that's not good, right?
That's correct.
yeah. Okay.
Right.
So
So
coal ashes, no.
peat ash, barbecue ash, wood ash
wood
are fine, but coal ash I would not. That's got heavy metals in it. You shouldn't be burning coal anyway.
No, but wood burn around.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Now back to tinfoil.
What? You're going ahead of me.
Oh, you just said tinfoil last time.
Oh, yeah, tin foil.
No.
What's the saying of metal, or say a bag of nails in the soil? A bag that is good for whatever is good.
Some
Is that
nails
rubbish?
over time will release iron, which is an essential plant nutrient, but I wouldn't be going adding nails to the soil.
You wouldn't.
No.
Yeah.
No tin foil, no plastic, no glass. None of that stuff doesn't break down. Keep it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
No compostable packaging, because it's designed to compost in a large scale system, but not at home. So none of those biodegradable bags or the compostable coffee cups or any of that stuff. No, keep it out.
Are the egg packers either?
Huh?
The egg packers either no.
The egg cartons?
Yeah.
They're fine. You can rip them up and use them, but I'd recycle them.
Yeah.
If you don't need them. I'm going to tell you about something that's going to be more suitable than paper in the compost in just a moment. All right, now, what else don't we want to put in? Let's go over some of the garden materials. There's weeds with seeds. Keep them out, especially if you're doing a cool and slow process. The seeds can persist because if you don't have a hot compost pile at 60, 70 degrees, they'll survive and you're just going to plant them seeds back in your garden. So what does a smart gardener do?
Take the weeds in.
Pick the weeds before they go to seed. Isn't that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct. And dandelions. If you pull the dandelion out with a flower on it and you get the taproot in the compost pile, the energy from that taproot is going to turn the flower to seed. So what do? Thank you. You did head the flower. I say pop the top.
Yeah.
Okay? All right, there's another kind of weed. Those are annual weeds. They spread by seed. There's perennial weeds that spread by root. And there's 4 nasty ones you want to keep out of the compost that's very common here in Ireland. And what are they?
Volvulus.
Docks is an invasive weed. Yes, keep all that stuff out.
Bindweed.
Bindweed's number one.
It is.
That stuff is obnoxious.
That sticky one. What's the cleavers?
The sticky weed's okay.
We've everything.
You can compost that. All right, so
No.
bindweed's number one. What spreads by root or by stem?
Thistles do anyway.
Thistle
and
can go in if you chop them up.
Ivy.
Ivy. Did I hear ivy? Did I say ivy? Let's say it once. Let's say it twice. All right, so bindweed and ivy are two. We got two more.
Moss.
Moss is fine.
Nettles? Blackberry.
Nettles are fine.
Blackberry briars? Blackberries?
Briars, thank you very much. Briars spring up. They grow so tall. They get heavy. They will bend over like a cane. When they hit the ground, they sprout root and then they keep bouncing.
Yeah.
Okay? Keep it out. Briars, ivy, bindweed, and scotch grass. Scotch grass top is all right, but scotch grass root, no. Keep it out because that stuff's going to persist and it will just reproduce. So those and any invasive weeds like docks and horsetail and giant rhubarb and all these Japanese knotweed and all this stuff, no, keep it out. No dryer lint. This is made of plastic. Okay? No nappies, no diapers, no chemicals, no tin foil, no metal, no glass, no plastic. Anything from animals, out. Technically, it is compostable. And eggshells set right in the middle. But I don't like to put in stuff from animals because it can smell. It can attract flies, especially meat will do the blue bottles, and then you get maggots. Rats are attracted to this stuff because you're just giving them dinner. Okay, so the eggshells are right in the middle. They don't really break down much. What I prefer with eggshells is to do this. When I'm baking something or roasting something, I'll put them in the oven in a tray, and then after baking in there, they'll break up into powder. Keep it in a little can or a jar, and then when you're preparing your garden beds, you can just get it back into the soil. Because there's good calcium, and calcium is a micronutrient that plants need, like iron, like magnesium and zinc and boron and manganese and all this other stuff, okay? The difference I want you to think about is anything from plants is in, given the exceptions we told you. Anything from animals is out. It doesn't matter if it's cooked or not. The cooked food actually breaks down quicker. If you got a little broccoli with a tiny bit of butter on it, I'm not going to cry about that. If you got a little salad with a sprinkle of Parmesan cheese, I still am not going to cry. I just don't want you putting in fish skins and chicken bones and fat and grease and yogurt and blocks of cheese, and you get the picture. It's the most important chart we're going to talk about today. And it basically has materials from here, which is very green or high in nitrogen, to materials that are brown and very high in carbon. So we're going from shit to shinola. No, I'm sorry. We're going from animal poop to wood. Okay, wood breaks down very slowly. Years, in fact. You're going to need a lot of fungus because the mushrooms are good at breaking down the wood. But if we have wood shavings, because now we've got more surface area, we got hay or straw or leaves, yeah, those are high in carbon. They may just take a while to break down, but at least wood, no, we're going to want to keep that out. Especially even branches, big thick branches, no, keep it out. They don't compost quickly, okay? Now on the other side here, we got poop. Poop is high in nitrogen, okay? But a lot of it comes bedded, like horses get it bedded on either wood shavings or straw or hay. And that's a good mix, that's fine. But if you got raw poop, you're gonna need to balance it with, over here, wood shavings, leaves, straw, hay, okay? Now, here's the two things, and I'm gonna show this over here. These two materials, grass cuttings and food, are too wet and too high in nitrogen to compost on their own. You will not have success composting either by themselves or together. Some people think, let's just mix the grass with the food. Since that's what we have right now. No, what you're going to get? A stinky, gooey, fly-ridden mess that's going to be a disaster. And you're going to say, that Dr. Compost was full of shit. Over here, that's where he belongs. That's Dr. Compost right there. Okay, anyway. So, when you're doing grass, you need to mix it. A perfect mix for making compost is half grass cuttings with half leaves. But the problem is that they are generated, the leaves are generated in the fall and the winter, and the grass is now until summer. So what do?
I've plenty of them still the whole time round anyway, because I've lots of trees.
Okay, so you're saying...
I pile them up and cover them and...
That's it.
Yeah.
We're going to store the leaves from the autumn so they can be used the following spring and summer. Then you get a good mix. Half leaves, half grass. Half leaves, half grass.
Lots of grass.
Okay? You can't do grass on its own. But here's something, and this is where the lazy man comes in here. Why collect the grass to begin with?
Why not leave
Oh, well,
it?
you can't walk
Why
to
not just cut the grass and leave it? If you let it grow too long,
Yeah, that's right.
you're going to
Keep it
get
short.
stem and it won't break down quickly.
We do ours
If
short.
you let it grow 4 or 5 inches and take an inch and a half off, those little bits will go down into the soil and break down. So you have to cut more often, but it's still less work because you don't have to collect it, you don't have to bag it, you don't have to pay for it. You don't have to stop and manage it and throw it away or even to compost it.
We changed our lawnmower to shredder.
Yeah.
Put it more often so we don't have
Yep. And that's the way to manage the grass. Because again, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to minimize everything and then I'll compost the rest. Okay, it's the same thing with branchy stuff. I'm going to get that away also, use that as a mulch. And then I've got just stuff from the garden. The flowers, the veg plants, the weeds, the hedge trimmings. Then I use those and I make compost out of that stuff. If you want to compost grass right now and you've got hedge cuttings, you can mix the hedge cuttings with the grass and that'll be a good mix. But put them in. The hedge cuttings give a little structure and gives little air pockets in the pile. So that helps, keeps it not getting so dense. Don't go to the composter, open the lid, plug your nose, stick it in there, and then escape off. When we're going to do food, we're going to only put in food that comes from plants. And we're going to actually put it into the composter, use our pitchfork to mix it with the stuff that's in the bin, and we're going to cover it over with a nice good thick layer of mixed garden and landscape material. So we always bury the food in the pile.
Okay.
That's the trick for managing food. You want to start your composter with about a third or a quarter or a third full.
And then
Put the food in, mix it with what's in there, and then cover it with a mixture of garden and landscape materials. So I garden for the weekend, I put the stuff on the ground, I will mix in water, we're going to show you this, and then right before I put it into the composter, I'll get the food from the kitchen, put it in, mix it, so you break it up, and then cover it over with the fresh stuff from the garden. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Problem solved, folks, right? All right, here's a sweet spot for composting, right here. These materials in the middle are well balanced as they are nutrient-wise. Bush trimmings, old weeds, old plants, old veg, all that stuff in the middle is ready to go. You just chop it up as you garden, you put it on the ground, give it a little sprinkle of water, any extra water runs off into the soil, and in it goes. Simple, easy. And then next week, when you're doing gardening again, open the lid, check it out, give it a little mix. If there's lacks in a little water, a little dry, give it a little sprinkle. Mix the fresh stuff, water it, put it in, let it go. Okay? There's 5 systems for managing garden materials. There's 5 systems for managing food. I'm not going to beat this to death because the booklet's got more on all this. But for garden materials, we talked about grass cycling. Cut it and leave it so you don't have to mess with it or manage it, work it, compost it, or pay for it to get rid of it. Okay? That's 1. Now we got 9 to go. Second, leaf mold. Cages here. What we're going to do is the most important thing about leaf mold is collecting the leaves and putting them in the baskets when they're wet. If they're not wet, it ain't going to compost. So what is the lazy gardener going to do?
Let him get wet.
Thank you, dear. Yay! So, after a nice heavy dew, after a nice little rain, and again in the autumn, come 1st of November, half of November, we'll have plenty of rain. I mean, I've lived here 20 years. I know that we can count on that. I collect it after a rain. So I don't have to collect dry leaves and then sit there and wet and mix and then add it in there. It's too much work. Let nature help you. So collect the leaves when they're wet and then just add them up in the pile. Those cages will hold 30 to 40 bags of leaf each. Okay? And then over a year, they're going to sink in half. So that's why I like to put 2 cages together, because the following year, let's say 2023, we're going to load those up with leaves. Now the autumn of 2024, they're going to sink half down. You combine those together because we're doing vintages here. You think vintages are just for wine? No, for leaf mold, folks. We got vintage 2023. We're going to combine the 2. We free up another cage for vintage 2024. And then I'll add another cage. So I'll get 3 cages on a rotation, because in 2025, I'm going to harvest 2023. I'm going to combine the 2 from 2024, and then I'm going to have 2 cages available for the autumn of 2025, and that cycle just keeps going. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, that's leaf mold. Get it wet. It can be open to the environment. No worries. Okay? All right, that's 2. Number 3 is mulching. Mulching is anything we apply to the surface of the soil. I like to use garden and landscape materials, things that don't compost well, like the landias or whatever they're called, or the laurels, or the what's it called, gristillania? You know what I'm talking about. That stuff. Anything that doesn't break down easy, I'm going to want to have as a mulch. Okay, so what happens, or again, any branches that are bigger than my finger or my thumb, even if it's a small amount, I will take those and I'll have a little bucket just for those, and I'll use my secateurs to cut them up in little pieces, and now all of a sudden I got a mulch that I can put around a bush or a tree. Okay? Again, they don't compost well. So I'm going to basically get them out of my compost system, and I'm going to use them as a mulch, and over time they will break down. But the beauty of a mulch is it helps suppress weeds. It keeps moisture in the soil, and as that mulch breaks down, it feeds the soil with nutrients. The thing I discovered in my yard in Seattle, which is similar to the climate here in the Pacific Northwest, is that I brought in a huge truckload from a tree surgeon every year, and I spread this onto the terraces and all throughout my garden. And what I found is that the mulch created a home for all these bugs and these worms and all these critters, and all of a sudden I had all these birds coming into my yard because they're feasting on all the goodies in the mulch. So it's a good strategy for biodiversity. Aha. Okay, 3 down, 7 to go. And you know, when I go into the food one, we accelerate. We just go boom, 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 boom. We're almost done. Okay, so the last 2 systems for garden and landscape materials are the holding bins, like these, that are bins that are going to basically, you're going to put materials into the bins as you generate them. It's a continuous process. Now, where do we want to put these? In the sun or the shade? Shade. Now we're here as a demonstration here. You're going to have to keep your eye on the moisture, okay? But mostly if you can get them in a shady or partially shady location, that's best on bare soil or on grass. Keeping it away from ivy, brambles, bindweed, because they're going to love all the goodies in there. So keep it away, all right? Okay, the holding bins, anything I put in this year is compost for next year. It's a year-long process. And as long as we're getting a good mix and we get it wet going in, you're going to make compost. It doesn't have to get hot. Okay? Is that all right? Holding bins. And I told you how to put food in here. Start it with the landscape material. just and after you garden and you got the stuff ready to go in, before you put it in, you bring the stuff from the kitchen, pop it into the bin, mix it with what's underneath, cover it over. Next and last system is the turning system. The turning system is different because we're creating one big batch at once. It's like baking a cake. We're going to mix the ingredients and we're going to then put it in the pan, stick it in the oven, and out comes the finished deal. In this case, the compost. So we're going to make a big batch, probably a minimum of that size of material. Half grass, half leaves is a good start. Half grass, half leaves, mixing in bush trimmings and weeds and other things from the garden. Perfect mix. You're going to get a lovely hot pile as long as you get it moist enough. And again, when the materials are fresh, you can't overwater because any extra moisture just flows off and into the soil. Okay? When the compost gets older, it acts like a sponge. So you don't want to overwater it when it's getting more mature. Okay? All right, in 2 weeks, we're going to turn that compost into another bin. A lot of these bins got 3 bins in a row. All right, so 2 weeks, and then we let it sit for a month or more. You'll have compost in 8-10 weeks. It takes work, and you really have to get your mix right. You got to get your moisture in there. Okay? That's it. That's half done now, folks. 5 systems here. We're going to fly through these because what I've done is give you advice on how to compost food in either a holding system and in a turning system. We're just mixing the food in with the ingredients in the lower sections of the pile of the batch.
Cooked and uncooked.
Cooked and uncooked, don't matter. Only things from plants. Okay, so let's dispel that myth of cooked or uncooked. That doesn't matter. Okay, a little butter, I'm not going to cry. A little Parmesan cheese, no fuss. Okay? Okay. The system for managing the food waste starts with bokashi. It's basically a fermentation system, Japanese. You get these buckets, you put in the magic powder, has this enzyme in it, breaks down the cell walls, and it will release a liquid that you can collect out of the bottom. That's like, and you dilute it. It can be used as a fertilizer or probiotic for the soil or for your plants. That's why people like it, but you're still going to be left with the solid material after a few weeks. So you're going to either have to bury that in the soil or compost it. So the only reason I choose bokashi is if I want that magic juice that comes out of the system. Okay? The next system, they're tumblers. Again, you can't just put food in there. You got to balance it up with some wood shavings, some straw, some leaves. Get a batch, let it mix and compost in there for a week or two. Take it out of there and then put it into a holding system or a pile and let it finish off for another 2-3 months. Okay, that's 2 down, 3 to go. Yay! The green cone is the only system we want to put in the sun. And it's the same kind of concept as the next one I'll cover, which is burial. We're going to bury this little green cone basket in the soil. We're going to put the food in there and shake some of that magic powder in it. It has enzymes and bacteria and other goodies like that, and it's going to help break it down. The worms in the soil will come in and get it and feast on it. Right? People, they say you can put meat bones and all that stuff in there, fine. I've never tried it. I use a wormery. But it is a viable way of doing it. The second to last system is the trenching or burial. Dig a hole or a trench a foot deep, put this food in, chop it up and mix it with the soil underneath and cover it over in a fallow area of the garden. All right, all set. Last one, wormeries. Worms and wormeries are my favorite way of dealing with food waste. We're sicking these wormeries in schools. Now we've got about 70 of them around Dublin and in County Laois right now at the moment. But basically you've got a wooden box. Now there's a stackable tray system, but I like a wooden box, sealed, 3/4 inch marine plywood. I fill it with 3/4 leaves and 1/4 shredded paper. The leaves are good for nutrients, the shredded paper is good for holding moisture. Then I'll bury the food. I'll dig a trench or a hole, I'll put the food in there, mix it with what's underneath and cover it over and let the worms do their thing. Now these worms are the red worms, not the night crawlers that you find deep in the soil. They like to eat soil, and as the soil passes through their gut, it breaks open the microorganisms that are in the soil, and that's what they digest and eat, and they kick out a little worm cast. The red worms like to live closer to the surface of the soil. They're just at the top here in the lawn. They love muck, cow poo, horse poo, leaf mold piles, compost piles. This is where you're going to find these red worms. They're everywhere. But these are the worms I'm going to put into the wormery. Worms breathe through their skin. They've got mucus around their bodies that absorb oxygen. That's why we need to give them a dark and moist environment. They love all this stuff, all this plant-derived food. Veg peels and fruit peels and coffee grounds and pasta and old flour and all this other stuff. They love it. And you'll create a beautiful, rich worm cast, which is, as I said, an aphrodisiac for plants because it's got a hormone in it that stimulates plant growth. Creates great compost, folks. Okay, now, we rarely get weather where it's freezing both night and day. And actually, you can probably go 3 to 5 days without it freezing completely. So the worms will just huddle in the middle, and because of some of the biological activity, there will be a little heat, and so they will survive in Ireland. Okay, so keep it, they don't like it too hot and they don't like it too cold. So in the winter you can feed them a little less, in the summer they'll eat more. So this worm box that's about that big will take 6 or 8, or let's say 3 to 4 kilos a week of food. It's good for a family of 2 to 4. All right, this is 2-year-old leaf mold. And as you can see, that is gorgeous. See that? That's what we're trying to get, right there. But the advantage of leaf mold is it's super easy to make, and it takes 2 years, but it's weed-free. This is the nice thing about leaf mold. Now it's more fungal because there's a lot of fungal activity there, but fungus is good for the soil. There's 5 ways to use compost. The first way to use compost, especially unscreened compost or compost like this, we can use it as a mulch. We can use it on top of the soil. We can put it in annual areas of the garden or around our perennial plantings. It looks good, and as the water goes through the compost, it's taking nutrients down to the root zone of the plants that live in the soil. The worms will also come up and grab the stuff and bring it into the soil. The earthworms, the night crawlers, okay? So it can be used as a mulch. A 1-year-old leaf mold can be used as a mulch, okay? A unscreened compost can be used as a mulch. The second way of using compost is as a soil amendment where we're actually getting it into the soil. So we're going to, on the garden beds, we put in about 2 inches on the top, and we dig it, use a spading fork, and we dig it in about 8 or 10 inches into the soil. This helps to provide a little more structure. It starts to feed the ecosystem of life in the soil, because as they break down the compost, they're releasing nutrients the plants can easily absorb. The third way of using compost is to screen it and use it to make a potting mix. Now, I come from Dublin, or at least I live there now. I shouldn't say I come from. I live in the Dublin area now, and I work with the Raheny Tidy Town group. And they're making a potting mix of 1/3 leaf mold, 2/3 soil, garden soil. And they're putting these planters, these planter boxes all over the village. They're on the buildings. And I have never seen a more beautiful bunch of flowers in my life. They're just full. By July and August, they're just full of petunias and beautiful flowers. And the compost is providing a steady feed of nutrients for the flowers. Okay? So 1/3 compost, 2/3 garden soil. We can also screen it real small and mix half screen compost with half sand and get a seed starting mix. The last way we can use the compost, and it's all in your book, is to make compost tea. We can put it in one of these sacks or a burlap sack. Soak it in water for 2 or 3 days and then take the water out of the barrel and we can irrigate and feed the plants with a compost tea, like making nettle tea, comfrey tea, manure tea, compost tea. Okay? And so those are the 5 ways of using compost. And I think the thing that I like to say is that the compost is a healthy soil is the foundation for a healthy garden. And compost is the foundation for that. You have to put compost in to make that soil rich and lovely. And it's a slow release, rather than being like chemicals which give you a shot of the 3 major plant nutrients. The compost has micronutrients in it. It has everything else other than has potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus. It also has iron, magnesium, calcium, boron, iron, you name it. It's all in there. It's everything the plants need. Now, we go to the garden center right now and we purchase quote unquote compost, but most of it is from the peat bog, right? Now I should probably get the 2 samples I have in the car, because I usually start out with, what is that? And everybody thinks it's compost. It isn't. Peat is made over centuries, and it's mostly fiber, it's carbon. So when you put that in the soil, as it breaks down, it takes nitrogen from the soil and competes with your plants for that nitrogen. So if you use a peat-based compost, you have to get on the chemical gravy train, because you're going to need that nitrogen for your plants. And all of a sudden now you're buying expensive chemical fertilizer. The plants go crazy, they grow, it's like giving kids Coca-Cola for a week. They get all crazy. And then what happens? They get sick. And the same thing with the plants. They grow and they get leggy, they get weak, and then they're susceptible to disease. And now you've got to buy pesticides. So this compost we've been sold from Bord and Amona is a hoax.
That's gone now, isn't it?
That's right. They're now phasing it out. But now there's companies that were importing it now from the Balkans, from Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. So this is not good. This compost from peat is no good, because it actually takes nitrogen from the soil to break it down, whereas compost is higher in nitrogen, so when it breaks down it gives nitrogen to the plants. The peat is lifeless. The compost is rich in microbes and all the different critters that the soil needs, all these soil organisms. The peat is acidic. It's binding nutrients in the soil so they can't get into the plant roots. Compost is a buffering. Homemade compost is a buffering type thing that neutralizes the soil and allows more nutrient flow from the soil into the plant roots. All right? So this stuff, this baloney that we're being sold in the garden centers that's made from peat is really not very good. So this is what you want. That is rich and lovely. There's a little snail shell, but that's all right. That's the stuff you want. All right?
And that's just leaves now.
That's just leaves. 2 years, leaves only. Is that okay? For Eco Kings by Tanks IE, it's Kingspan. You can order these, that's €80 plus VAT delivered. That includes delivery. 600 liters, nice thing here. Irish Timber Products out of Atboy in County Meath. The pallet systems, again, if you're getting pallets here, you could give them away for people to make composters, right? So there's an opportunity. But you can make a composter out of anything, really.
Yeah.
I've seen these plastic pallets. They last forever. Just as at a school, they had these things tucked away in the back 40. Well, we're gonna take them out of there, and we're gonna make bins like that. Biodiversity starts with the soil, because there's a living ecosystem in the soil, and if we're feeding it with compost, we're going to stimulate that plant life, which actually then, or that life in the soil, which stimulates plant growth, bigger flowers, better fruits and veg, better plants, more birds and bees and everything else. Okay, so this is the foundation for building biodiversity.